So Ralph Hasenhuttl, he started his managerial tenure at Southampton, and I'm going to be honest, I'm mightily impressed by his first press conference on Thursday. Already he starts to imply some keen ideas, and most importantly for us as fans, some positivity. And you can head over to the card above my head if you want to watch my initial reaction to the news. But today I've got you a special episode. I took some time out of my day to research a little bit more into our new manager, and I speak to a German football expert, journalist, and he tells us everything perhaps you need to know and maybe enlighten us of our new manager for those that haven't had time to research yourselves, and maybe even educate some of you on how to practice some of the pronunciation. But I'm also delighted to announce that this video is sponsored by OneFootball, and OneFootball's app is easy to keep up to date with the latest transfer news, the latest scores and stats all in one place. To download the OneFootball app, click the link in the description below. So then, welcome along to this video of Ralph Hasenhuttl. I've had pretty much 48 hours to perfect that, and on today's call we have got a writer, broadcaster, journalist for German football, and for one of Germany's biggest international broadcasters of DW News, DW Sports, and someone, you know, it's fair to say, watched a fair bit of German football over the last few years. Hopefully here to give us some insights. Jonathan Harding, welcome to the show, mate.
Thanks so much for having me.
So, first of all, you know, how was my pronunciation?
Excellent, I have to say. Done a great job there.
Well, I mean, can you improve that any more at all?
I mean, it's unfair because if you speak German for a long time, or if you've lived in Austria, Germany, then you get used to the accents and the umlaut. But Ralph Hasenhuttl is a good guy.
All right, yeah. Excellent. So, I mean, first question for those that haven't spent too much time researching, then, who is Ralph Hasenhuttl? They call him the Alpen Klopp.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the Klopp comparison is a tricky one for me. You know, I understand why it's being made, but I'm not sure I feel so comfortable with it. Ralph Hasenhuttl is his own coach. He is his own person, and I think Klopp is such a special and unique character that if you compare anything with him, you're always going to fall under his shadow, and it's going to be difficult to make that comparison because he's so successful at what he does. I think Hasenhuttl deserves to be in his own right, away from that shadow. He's a special coach who I think his strongest quality is empathy. He seems to understand how to connect to people, to bring a team together. His track record certainly shows that. He did a great job at Ireland before anybody really knew who he was. Then he did the same job at Ingolstadt. He's got both sides promoted from the second, from divisions up. It's an impressive record, especially given the small time frame. I think he did both clubs in terms of relegation candidates to promotion in something like 18 months. So Southampton fans should take heart from that, given the current situation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Ralph actually said that in his first press conference in front of the media this afternoon. No, he doesn't quite like the sort of moniker, the nickname that the media have given him. But yeah, he was in the same school, the same footballing school, done their coaching badges together. You know, very similar sort of styles, and perhaps very similar characters. I mean, what can we take from him as a character? I mean, it's been widely commented that, some of our recent managers didn't quite command the respect or the attention of the room.
As a character, I think his biggest quality, as I say, is empathy. His time at Leipzig, he spent managing to get a lot of relatively high-profile players in order. Everybody in that team really wanted to run through walls for him. You hear that a lot about Klopp. You hear that a lot about other managers who are very motivational. And I think it's fair to recognise that Hasenhüttl has done that in his own way. He's recognised how best to play teams, and I'm sure we'll talk about setup and tactical approach. But he knows how he wants to play. He plays very attacking football. He creates a system that teams buy into, players buy into it, and he's able to connect to individuals in a way that I think is a really rare technique under managers, under people. If you can communicate with individuals and make them feel like they're important, whatever you do, it's going to enhance the end product. And I think he deserves a lot of credit for that. He did it at Ingolstadt. Ingolstadt were not a team famous for anything, really. And they didn't have very many famous players or quality players, but they got promoted off the back of a collective strength, of a collective identity. It wasn't necessarily that pretty, but they were very, very effective. And it's one of the reasons why players like Pascal Gross, for example, get signed by Brighton, and everybody says, who is this guy? Why is he any good? Well, it's because of the work that Ralph Hasenhuttl did with him at Ingolstadt. And I think that's a big positive.
It's certainly encouraging, and certainly to say that Saints have lost their identity over the last sort of 18 months, 2 years, and perhaps the recent managers in Puel, Pellegrino didn't have so much of an identity, and perhaps Mark Hughes was the type of character that tried to point the blame at anybody else but himself. But it seems like Hasenhüttl takes responsibility for his actions and really sort of gets the coaches and the playing staff on the side.
Yeah, and the other thing is he brings a philosophy, and I think Ralf Kruger seems to be, from what I've read and what I see about the man, he seems to be quite forward-thinking, quite innovative. I think that's a really positive sign to have, or a trait to have in a chairman these days. You need someone who's going to think outside the box, because how is a club like Southampton going to compete with other sides in the Premier League when so much money is being spent? You've got to find a way to be successful that isn't just trying to follow others. And I think in the appointment of Hasenhüttl, Kruger has shown that Southampton are ready and willing to do that, because Hasenhüttl brings a philosophy with him. He brings an attacking style of football, an aggressive style of football. And if you're not going to take part in that, if you're a player that doesn't buy into that, you're not going to be there. And I think that's an encouraging philosophy. And the most important thing is Southampton given the time to develop that, because as you've just said, you've listed a number of managers who were given the chance to do that. And from the outside, it looks like those were short-term appointments to try and solve some sort of a problem. But if you can identify how you want to be as a club going forward and pick the right person for it, I think that's a great sign.
Yeah, and based on his reputation, it all speaks for himself as well. Sort of growing through the ranks, through the leagues, starting down in sort of the third league in German football, to promotion with Ingolstadt. But most of his plaudits and most of his headlines have been written about the success with RB Leipzig over the last sort of 2 years or so. Obviously big backing from Red Bull, but managed to get them second in the Bundesliga behind the conglomerate of Bayern Munich and led them to a Champions League campaign and into Europa League quarterfinals.
Yeah, and he deserves a lot of credit for the way that he did that. Obviously, you make the point there about having the financial backing. That certainly does make it easier to buy better quality players. But he got to the point where the way that they were playing football, particularly in transition, was just fantastic to watch. I think that's what's going to be interesting about how he develops now. How he played at Leipzig, he often played with a 4-4-2, sort of like a double holding midfield role, which effectively looks more like a 4-2-4 on the pitch, which is extremely attacking when you think about it. But often those wide players, were players like Naby Keita or Marcel Sabitzer. And Marcel Sabitzer is Austrian international. Naby Keita now plays for Liverpool. Very dynamic players who can play in different positions, very versatile. There was enough protection in the middle. Everybody was winning the ball back so high up the pitch that it left so little room for the opposition to move out. And I think eventually you can figure teams out. One of the reasons I think towards the end, he changed his approach. They tried to focus a little bit more on possession. It's one of the reasons why he's not at Leipzig anymore, because Ralf Rangnick, who's the sporting director there, now back as head coach, he has this idea of how to play transition football, quick football. Ralph Hasenhuttl came, he certainly agreed with that mentality. Now I'm keen to see how he takes it forward. I think he's always wanted to test himself as a manager in the Premier League. I think he said as much at his opening press conference. His English is very good. How's he going to take that style of football forward? Because he's played so well in this underdog role, and I think that's going to suit him well here as well as Southampton.
Based on the research that I've said, almost sort of, just like you said, it kind of goes into a 4-2-4 sometimes, but on paper it sometimes looks like a 4-2-2-2, and he admitted that in his conference again today. He has whips from the fullbacks, and as you're pushing forward, we go to a 4-2-4. So it'd be really encouraging for a throwback to the 1970s, 80s, when we had so much success with Keegan, Shannon, etc. For those that are watching or listening along, do let us know, what you remember of those days as well. But, by all intentions, it seems like he will be, applying those philosophies to Southampton. Is it, what more can you tell us? Is it something that Saints fans can really get excited about?
I would. To be honest with you, 6 months ago, there was some consideration, will he be one of the names for the Bayern Munich job? I think, there was certainly feeling before Niko Kovac was appointed that he was one of the candidates. He used to play for Bayern Munich's second team. He has a fairly modest playing career, but he, as a manager, has certainly got his own character and his own philosophy. And I think I'd be over the moon. I think this is a fantastic appointment for Southampton. And, even in the face of some, I saw the clip on Match of the Day with Gary Lineker quipping with Danny Murphy about Hasenhüttl. And, I think Danny Murphy said, what did he say? He said, it was something about Ingolstadt and, oh, well, time will tell. Well, I think we can be a bit more optimistic about that, because theoretically you could say it about every manager. Time will tell, yes, but let's be more thorough with how we present the information. Ralph Hasenhuttl is an excellent coach with great experience, who plays attacking football, who can enhance this squad. That's something we should be talking about. We should be talking about this as an exciting opportunity for a strong English football club to get back to the way that they want to play. And also, as you just said, to get back to finding out who they are again. I think he's the perfect coach for letting them do that. I think there are some individuals in the Saints team where I think they got to be really excited about the arrival of this coach. I'd love to see what Pierre-Emile Højbjerg thinks about this. There's a player who could be really good in transition. Stuart Armstrong, that midfield could suddenly come alive a bit. Is James Ward-Prowse going to be a bit more like that player who was so electric at England youth level? There are opportunities now for certain players to take a step up based on how he wants his teams to play.
Excellent. You're giving me goosebumps, John. And you literally took the question off the tip of my tongue. What sort of players that could flourish under his leadership? Højbjerg, Armstrong, Ward-Prowse really hasn't had much game time as well. But I suppose let's finish it off though. Your overall thoughts of the appointment. You briefly sort of touched upon it there, but although as Danny Murphy said, time will tell. But some critics would say he's unknown to many. And the Premier League but he is widely tipped to do well. I mean, what would you say to Southampton fans for the future with Ralph Hasenhuttl?
I would say take heart from the fact that the German coaching system has a great track record of producing talented coaches. You're not going to get a fantastic batch every year, obviously. But if you just look at the record of the number of coaches that have been successful in Germany, or even the ones that have come across to England, Jurgen Klopp is obviously the best example. But look at what David Wagner did with Huddersfield. No one expected that. Daniel Farke's got Norwich absolutely firing in the Championship. And even down as far, I don't want to sound disrespectful, but where Barnsley are, with Daniel Stendel, who used to coach Hannover 96, you've got coaches who've come in and made an impact. And there's something to be said about thinking outside the box, looking at a different way of approaching coaching, looking at how coaches abroad have learnt, how that course has developed or changed their mindset and allowed them to think not just about football, but also about how to improve the team, how to bring in the right group of players to create the right kind of atmosphere. I'm really excited for the Premier League, because I think he's a great manager to have in a league like that. He's exciting. I'd be very excited if I was a Southampton fan, and I think you've got every reason to believe that the future is very bright. I think you're going to stay up, no problem. That's how far I feel about him. He's got a great track record on it. I know it's the Premier League. I know it's intense. I know it's different, but if there's anyone that can do it in a short space of time, I think he's the man.
Amazing stuff. And I'm starting to, minute by minute, hour by hour, I'm starting to feel more and more confident about this new coach. But if anybody wants to follow you, read your articles, see you on German TV, let's say, as well, where can we find you?
JohnBlog66 on Twitter is where I do most of my musings, so feel free to join along. But I'll be keeping a keen eye, and I wish you all the best with him, because he's such a great head coach.
Amazing stuff, and really great to speak to you. Thanks for joining me, mate.
Always a pleasure.